Hello, my name is Jason Carter, and today we're going to talk about using Google Slides for NTI2DL. We're going to focus on how to use Google Slides to enhance your lessons. We're not going to focus so much on the tools of Google Slides, but we are going to focus on how Google Slides and those tools can enhance the learning. So this is not going to be a training on how to do different things in Google Slides, rather how you can use Google Slides to enhance your lessons. My name is Jason Carter, and I have been teaching in the district for 16 years now. I spent the first 9 years as a fourth grade teacher, and the last 7 have been as a technology teacher. So let's go ahead and get started with our presentation. So here's what you're going to be learning today. You're going to learn how to use a Google Slide presentation for recorded and live lessons. You will learn how to use a Google Slide presentation to provide feedback for your students. You will learn how to use a Google Slide presentation to engage student learning, and you will learn how to use a Google Slide presentation to summatively and formatively assess your students. So I decided to choose the Google Slide presentation because I know that some of the hardest things for teachers to do during NTI are how do we provide feedback quickly in a timely manner. How do we engage our students in learning through a computer without just having them get on and play a game? And also, how do we assess what our students are actually learning through this NTI process? So I wanted to touch on those specifically. We're going to discuss how that looks with a recorded lesson and how that also looks with a live lesson. There will be a little bit of overlap. Some of the things that you're going to learn will be able to be used with both a recorded or live lessons. I know that most of your lessons are probably going to be live, but there may be some lessons that you would like to record. For example, maybe you taught a live math lesson at 9 o'clock in the morning, but your students, you want them to work on some math later on in the afternoon. So you post a lesson through a Google Slide that they can complete later on in the day based on the lesson that you taught live earlier that morning. So there's a lot of different ways that you can use this tool, and you can use it through all subject areas. So this is going to be something that I think will be very beneficial moving forward as we dive into 2DL. All right, before we get started, let me just say, if you are going to use a Google Slide presentation for recorded or live lesson, you want to make sure that you assign each student a copy, and you do that through Classroom. So when you are creating the assignment for students to view in Classroom, you're going to add your Google Slide presentation, and then you're just going to click to give each student their own copy. That way, it's like they have their own workbook, they have their own worksheet. They will be able to manipulate the slides if you need them to. And so it's very important that when you give that assignment that you make sure to give each student a copy so that they're working on their own copy, and they're able to manipulate that as they need to. Okay. Google Slides is a great resource to use for recorded lessons because it will allow you to incorporate a multitude of resources all in one place, and then assess your students' understanding of the concepts that you're trying to teach. So some of the things that we're going to take a look at today in the presentation are inserting instructional videos to help enhance students' understanding of various concepts. So if you're teaching a math lesson and you just feel like you need to add a little bit more, I'm going to show you how you can use those instructional videos right inside the slideshow to help with that understanding. Inserting voice recordings to help struggling readers. I think that's a very important tool to be able to use, and Google Slides offers that. So this would be something that maybe our interventionists might use. Our ESL teachers might want to use this. This would be great for those struggling readers or students who have English as their second language. They may not be able to read all of the words on the page, and it may be important for you to add some voice recordings in to help them get through whatever the content is that you're wanting them to learn. So we're going to look at an example of how to insert or some of the voice recordings and how they can help. Inserting links for easy access to other materials. So this might be if you need them to access another website, or if you need them to access maybe something in Wonders, you can include that link inside of your Google slideshow, and students would be able to easily access that instead of having to leave the slideshow, go find something, come back, it would be right there embedded in the slideshow. So I think that's important so that kids don't have to do, especially younger students, don't have to do a lot of clicking around. Um, Create editable slides for your students to demonstrate understanding or complete basic tasks and activities. And I think that's one of the engagement pieces, is allowing students to be able to manipulate something on the slide, whether it's answering a question, whether it's dragging and dropping, some of those different skills that they need. It helps with some of your hands-on students if they're able to manipulate things on the screen. And so we're going to take a look at what that would look like in a slideshow. And then with a recorded lesson, you can easily include other Google resources. So maybe you want to include a Google form for an end of the week assessment, end of the unit assessment, end of the lesson assessment. Google Docs, same thing. So it's really easy. It's really easy to add those in. And again, it would just be embedded right inside of the presentation. And then the last thing that we're going to look at with our recorded lessons is how can we provide feedback to students quickly and easily, because that's a very important piece. We need to have that feedback piece to be able to make sure that our students understand what they're doing well or maybe what they need to continue to work on. So let's get started. So the very first thing that I have on here is the instructional videos. And this is just showing you two different examples of videos that you can include. So the one up here at the top is a video that I did for a lesson this past year. And I just embedded this in here so that you can see. You could actually record something and embed that actual video that you created right into your slideshow. And your students don't need to leave or go watch it somewhere else and then come back to your lesson or anything like that. You can include that right here. So if it's a recorded lesson, you may even on the first slide put a video of yourself explaining what the lesson is and what they're going to do throughout the slideshow. I think it's a really great tool to be able to have that there so that students don't need to jump back and forth from one place to another, that everything they need is right here. And you can also you can also include links like a YouTube link down there at the bottom. So I wanted to show you those two different ways of including instructional videos and how important those can be to student learning. Okay, the next slide here is an example of the voice recording and how this could be used in a lesson. This happens to be a science lesson that I used during NTI with kindergartners or first graders. So they were labeling the parts of the flower, and for the kindergartners, I needed them to be able to label the parts of the flower. That was the goal of the activity, and also to be able to drag the words over and drop them. So the technology skill for them was dragging and dropping, but I needed them to know what the words were. For some of our struggling readers in kindergarten who weren't able to read those words, this activity would have been difficult. So what I did was I just incorporated these voice recordings here, and I used a voice recording software, Vocaroo, and recorded those, saved it right to my Google Drive, and then I was able to just insert these right here. So if the kid didn't understand or wasn't able to read the word, they could click on that and listen to it. Or even if they were able to read the word, maybe they were unsure if they were reading the word correctly. So they could click here, listen to it, and go, oh, yeah, I do know what that word is. And it allowed them to be able to complete the activity. So maybe for math lessons or science lessons where some of the vocabulary may be a little more challenging for some of your lower readers, this would be a good tool to use so that they don't get caught up in the reading part, but they can actually do the content part. You could use it for reading lessons as well. And I think it's a great tool. Like I said, intervention teachers, this would be a useful tool for them, but really for anybody, so that students don't get hung up on the reading of certain words, especially if it's vocabulary that may be above their level, or if it's taking away from what the point of the lesson or activity is. So that's an example of how you can incorporate voice recordings into your Google slideshow. The next thing is inserting links for easy access. So I know one thing that my daughter struggled with this past NTI season, and she was a kindergartner, was everything was in a different place. We had to go to this website to do this activity and this website to do that activity. And she knows how to use a computer, but it was just difficult to have to click this and close that and move this. So with a with a Google slide, it's really nice to just include those links right in here on the page. It will open up a new tab for them on their computer, but then they can just click that, X that tab out, and it'll take them right back to their Google slide. So I've created a hyperlink right here for Brain Pop, so they can just click right on the image and it'll take them right to the Brain Pop video that I want them to view. And then I also just have a regular link here to Lexia. So if they needed to go do some work on Lexia, they can click on that link. So you can use this any way. You can include all kinds of links if it's something that you need them to go do, if it's something you need them to go see, if it's another website that you need them to go visit for the lesson, then you can include that link right here on your Google slide, and it's going to make it a lot easier on students to have everything in one place. The next slide here is an example of an interactive slide for students. So this was part of a lesson that I taught in summer school to kindergartners, and this was just a basic addition lesson. So what I did was I just included the addition problems, and I put text boxes here. And so what the students needed to do was they needed to just type the answers in, and then they could turn this into me, and then I could very quickly check and see whether they were understanding the addition concepts that we had been learning about or not. I included a number line at the bottom to help students that may need to see that visual and may need to use that to help them. But this is a really easy way, and this is a very basic way. There are obviously many more things you can do, but this is an example of a way for students to be able to complete an assignment, an activity, a really quick assessment check for you to be able to see, are they understanding what we're doing? So through a recorded lesson, they do this, they can turn this into you, and then you can check and go, ooh, for my live tomorrow, I'm really going to need to go back over addition because 70% of my kids struggled with this, or I only have 3 that didn't get it. Maybe I need to go back now and pull them into a small group, and we need to go over some of these addition skills again, but the rest of my class did great with it. So this is a really good way for you to assess, and it also gives the students an opportunity to um, complete something. It gives them an opportunity to manipulate the screen, type in some answers, and instead of just sitting and getting so much. The next slide is another example of having students manipulate a slide and being able to get feedback from this very quickly, being able to assess. So this was also a lesson that I did for kindergarten for summer school. For this lesson, the students needed to, after they had done other parts of the activity, so at the beginning they watched a little video and watched my video, and we talked through some of the things that about the coins. They then needed to buy the front and the back of each coin, and all they were going to have to do is drag the picture and drop it under the correct title for that coin. So this was another really quick way for me to assess, do they know what the coin is? Do they know what it looks like? We went over these. I also could have included some voice recordings here for those students that may had struggled with reading. Now, I knew my students pretty well, and I knew that they would be able to read the words that were on here, but that would be a way to incorporate both. So now we have the slide that they can actually manipulate, and you're going to get a quick assessment, but then also you have a way to incorporate some of those tools that we talked about earlier. And then this is also an example of how you could use Google Slides for an activity or a quick assessment. So this was a lesson on syllables, and I wanted the students to be able to demonstrate their knowledge of syllables. And so we had text boxes here, and they needed to type in the number of syllables for each word. You notice that there are the voice recordings beside each word here because I knew that some of my students would struggle with this. So they may not be able to read the word. And so I wanted them to be able to tell me the number of syllables. So I included this voice recording in here for them. I did tell them I wanted them to try it first without listening to the voice recording. I wanted them to read the word and then put the number of syllables. And then after they had done all of them, go back and if they needed to double check with the voice recording, they could do that. But this is just another example of how you can use Google Slides to get feedback on how your students are doing, and you can assess them, a really quick assessment. Later on, we're going to look at a more in-depth assessment possibly and how you might be able to use that. But these are some of the within the slideshow, how can you just quickly assess and look at, did students understand, especially with the recorded lesson? If you're live with students, it's going to be a little bit easier because you're going to probably be communicating back and forth with them, and you may be able to tell a little bit better what they're understanding. But with a recorded lesson, you may not know. So this allows you to be able to test and see, did they understand what we just talked about for the last 20 minutes or 30 minutes? This is an example of how you can insert other Google tools very easily into your Google Slides. So I've got two examples here of a Google Doc and a Google Form that I have linked here. This one is linked strictly with just the link itself, and this one is linked with an image to show you two different ways that you could do this. But students can just very easily click on this, and it will take them right to, I'll click on it just so you can see, it'll take them right to something that you may want them to complete. It may be a bigger assessment like we were just talking about earlier. So this is a kindergarten lesson that I did in my regular technology class. And this would be something that I wanted to see, could they type the upper and lowercase letters of the alphabet? And so this was a Google form that I had created. It's real easy to insert that. Once the kids are finished, all they need to do is click their X, and it's going to take them right back to the slideshow. So there shouldn't be a lot of confusion or clicking back and forth. This is a Google Doc that I have linked with the image to show you another way that you could incorporate if you needed your students to respond to maybe some reading, or maybe answer a science question and they needed a little bit more room. You could insert a doc there and have them do that on the doc. This is another example of an activity that I had my students do in technology class, but I just want to show you that including those tools inside of your Google Slide is really nice and easy, because it also changes things up a little bit. Instead of always having those slides that they are going to manipulate, now it took them somewhere else and allowed them to do something a little bit different. So easily provide feedback. In Google Classroom, you can view students' work while they're working or as they complete their assignment. You can add private comments to the assignment or grade and return the assignment with comments. So this allows you to quickly assess the student's understanding of the concept taught. So you can get on to their Google slideshow while they're working on it. You as a teacher can pull up that student work tab on Google Classroom, and you can click on any student and you can see their progress. So even if it's a recorded lesson and you want to see who's even working on it, you can do that. And then for the students that turn that in, you can very quickly look and see who got the concept, send it back to them with a comment at the bottom so that they can see, oh, I need to work on this a little bit, or she wants to meet with me tomorrow so that we can go over some things a little bit more. So it's a really good tool to be able to get on and see that while they're working, and also when they're finished. Okay, so now we're going to talk about using a Google Slide presentation for a live lesson. And this is something that I really enjoy doing and I think is very beneficial. It's a little bit more involved because you may or may not want your students to open the slideshow until you are completely finished with what you need to say, so that they're not working on it ahead of time. But it's a really good way to be engaged with your students at the same time while they are working. And so let's take a look at some of the things that we're going to talk about for the live lessons. We're going to take a look at inserting links for easy access to other materials for students who need additional practice or enrichment. So just like with the recorded lesson, how we had those links on there, this time I'm going to show you what that might look like if you have students who are struggling or students who need more. Like maybe they've mastered that skill you just taught and you realize that, wow, they got through that really quickly, and now they're sitting and waiting on the live lesson for us to finish getting through everything because I have some kids that are taking a little longer. You can include some links to some enrichment activities for them while they're waiting, or kids that are struggling. You notice that you have 3 students that struggle with that live lesson and they're maybe not ready to move on yet. So what you're going to do with them is you're going to have them do some additional practice through links that you've included. Creating an editable slide for your students to demonstrate immediate understanding of concepts. So this is that formative assessment. This is going to look very similar to the way that it did in our recorded lesson. So students can get on and actually be working, but you can again pull that up while they're working right there, because you're doing a live lesson and right now everybody should be working on that. So it's very similar to in class if you went through your lesson and then passed out a worksheet or had them complete a workbook page or something like that, and they're bringing that up to you to check, or you're walking around the room. Think about it that way. You're able to walk around your Google Classroom and see exactly what kids are working on as they are working on it. Easily include other Google resources. Again, your Google Forms and your Google Docs. So that hasn't changed. Your live lesson is going to be the same as the recorded lesson on that. Provide feedback to students instantaneously. So with your live lesson, if you are watching what they're doing in classroom, then you're going to be able to very quickly see who's ready to move on, who's not. Do I need to reteach this entire lesson because the majority of my class doesn't understand it? Or, wow, I'll rock that one out. Everybody got it and we're ready to move on. So you'll be able to do that instantaneously through your Google Classroom with the live Google slide. And then the last thing that I have on here is you can use this for an entire unit or an entire strand of a unit in one slideshow. So this is something that I have done before. And there's a couple of ways that you can do that. You can add different slides each day. So you're just adding on to the slideshow that you created on Monday for Tuesday. So after you've done your Monday live lesson, you realize, ooh, we need a little bit more on adding numbers. We need a little bit more on the plant life cycle. And so you go in and you add 2 more slides for the next day that your students are going to work on, but it's still going to be part of that original Google slide presentation. And you're just going to reassign that to them for Tuesday. It could be that you go ahead and create the whole week's worth of work um, for Monday. And you have that assigned to them on Monday. And so you say on Monday, we're going to work on slides 1 and 2. And on Tuesday, we're going to work on slides 3 and 4. And on Wednesday, we're going to work on slides 5 and 6. And that way you have the end goal there, and they can see what the end is going to look like at the beginning. So it kind of helps you, and it may help them. So that's something that you can definitely do, and you can do it in those 2 different ways. You can either add to your slideshow each day based on what your students did the day before, or you can go ahead and have the whole thing planned out, and then you can work through that with them each day. Okay, so this is what I was talking about for the additional practice or enrichment. So as you are checking for understanding, you have students complete the activities either early, or it's taking them a really long time, either because they're struggling or maybe because they understood that skill and they got through it very quickly. So you may want to have additional support for them. And so what you may do is add links in. And what I have linked here is 2 Google Forms. And these are when my students first come to the lab, they have to practice typing their username and password and such. So I just use these as an example. Let's say that we got through our lesson and I'm checking everybody to see how they're working on their Google slide. And I noticed that, 3 kids are already done. I go in, I check, wow, all 3 of them did really, really well. And they mastered that. They got all the answers correct. They did it on their own. They're ready to move on. So I'm going to send them a comment back on their Google slide. Great job. I want you to click on link number 2 on the next slide. And so those students would come here and they would click on that link, and it would take them to a Google form that's going to have them do something that's a little bit more difficult than what we just did. It might be a website that I have them go to. It might be a game that I have them go play that's a little bit harder than the skill that they just learned that enhances that for them. Then I have my other students who it took them a little bit longer, and when they turned in their Google slide, I noticed that, wow, they really struggled with this. They only got 4 out of 10 right, and they're going to need some extra support here. So I'm going to have them click on. I'm going to send them a comment with their Google slide that says, "Hey, click on number 1. Click on link 1. We need a little bit more practice." And the good thing about this is nobody else in the class is going to know who's clicking on which link. They're not going to see the comments that I sent to the individual students. Nobody's going to be embarrassed that they're having to do a little additional work. This is a one-on-one interaction between you and the student, but it's live. So you just send them a comment and pop that right back to them, and then they can come here and click on link number 1. And so that's going to take them to something that maybe is additional practice, or maybe we've backed off a little bit and we need to go back and do some of the foundational skills that they've missed. Okay, this is just an example too of a slide that allows students to manipulate, and you'd be able to watch them as they manipulate and see very quickly, are they understanding? So for this particular slide that I created, this was a science lesson done with NTI, where students had to insert 3 different amphibians. So the pictures went down here at the bottom in these boxes. They had to insert those pictures, and then they had to insert or take these boxes at the top and drag those and set those on top of the images to tell me if the amphibians are warm-blooded or cold-blooded, if they have lungs, gills, if they breathe with lungs, gills, or both, if they had hair or fur, if they have feather, scales, or wet, moist skin. And so while students are working, you can actually get in and see how they're doing. So this would be a way for you to get in, give some instant, get some instant feedback and assess very quickly, and then be able to provide that feedback and communicate with the students on how they're doing and maybe what they need to work on. So this was just another example of an editable slide that students would be working on, and you could have them work on it during their live lesson. I'm going to give you 5 minutes to complete slide number 4, and you could check after that 5 minutes how everybody did, and then you could move forward with your lesson. So you can pause and stop in between if you want to, and you want everybody to work, because you can pull up your classroom's view and you can go through and you can take a look at what students are working on. And providing immediate feedback. So as students are actively working on their assignments, you can peek in to see their progress and provide feedback. In the student work view, you are able to click on a student and join them while they are working. You can add a private comment that the students will immediately be able to see. Students can then respond if needed, so there's active dialogue taking place during learning. And I've taken a screenshot here of my daughter. I included her in one of my classes just to kind of show you what this might look like. So this is what you would see in classroom, inside of your classroom with that particular assignment. So it shows me that this is the work that's been assigned to her. I can click on that and it's going to open her Google slideshow. So I'm looking at it and she's looking at it at the same time, and she's working through that. So as she's working on this, I noticed that maybe she's done these 3, maybe she missed the first 2, and I will add a private comment over here. Hey, maybe you should double check the first 2 again. Maybe you need to listen to the word. And she can respond back to me. So we can have an open dialogue back and forth about her learning, and it can be very quick, and then I can move on to the next student, and then I can come back and double check and see how she did. So I think this is a really important tool. While students are actively working on an activity or assignment, you can get on and you can comment back. And that's with anything in Google Classroom, but particularly I like in Google Slides that they are manipulating something probably on the slide. And so you can watch their thought process and what they're doing. And so then you can just add private comments. It goes right to them while they're working. It'll pop up. They can respond to that private comment if they have any questions. And it's a really neat way to give feedback, and because I think that's one thing that we really struggle with during NTI is how do we give that immediate feedback even through a live lesson, especially with everybody being live at one time. If you have all 20 of your students or 25 of your students at one time, how can you provide that individual feedback? And I think this is a way to do it where, one, you're not calling anybody out in front of the group, and nobody should feel intimidated because nobody else can see what they're doing besides you. And so it allows students to feel safe in completing their work to the best of their ability, but also allows you to still give them that feedback. So that's all that I have for you today. I hope that you found this beneficial and it was easy to follow. If you have any other questions or you need any other additional support, please don't hesitate to reach out. I can help you with some of those specific tools in Google Slides if you're not as familiar with those. But my email address is on here for you, and But I hope that you found today beneficial. And again, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. It was good to be able to get on here and share some of this with everyone. And I hope that you guys start your year off well and everything is going smoothly for you. Thank you so much for your time.